Hello and welcome to another video. In this video I will be reviewing The Madman's Daughter by Megan Shepherd. First of all, let's talk about the cover, okay? That is one of the most beautiful book covers I've ever seen. Seriously. Just the Gothicness and the Victorianness, and her dress and the red 3D writing, and it's just mysterious and gothic and beautiful. And the same with the spine. It has the girl here, there, with the dress on, and the writing, and the author's surname. And the back is lovely as well. It has these little subheadings, and then descriptions, and yeah, so that's the beautifulness of the book. I'm going to start off by saying that I wrote notes to help me with this review, and I've been looking for them as much as I can, and I cannot find them, so I'm just going to try and do this without the notes, which shouldn't be difficult. So, we have a main character, Juliet, who I presume is this person. Amazing. And this is basically a retelling of The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells, which is a classic. And in that story, there is a guy, a doctor, who lives on an island and does weird things to animals, experiments on animals. It's a retelling of that, and it's set in Victorian era, and the main character, Juliet, is a maid, so she cleans houses and stuff like that, and one day, it's hard to explain, but what happens is, she goes with a couple of her friends to this university, I think. See, this is why I need my notes, but I'm sorry if this review is lacking, but so basically, she goes to this university to clean some rooms, and there she finds students operating on a rabbit. And it's described in this book as vivisection. Like, dissection is dissecting an animal, a dead animal, to see like the organs and stuff like that. But vivisection is doing that to a live animal, and then this animal screams, and Juliet rushes in, picks up an axe, and chops its head off to put it out of its misery. And that's how it starts, which I think is like one of the most amazing opening chapters ever. Come on, like, the rabbit is being brutally harmed, and to end its suffering, she chops its head off with an axe. How cool is that chapter? But anyway, and then she looks at this piece of paper of a diagram of how to do this vivisection that these students were doing, and it has the initials HM in the corner, and basically her father, who she always thought was dead, is Henry Moreau, and she thinks he's dead, and she sees this piece of paper, this diagram of how to do this dissection, and she now thinks that he is alive. She has an inkling that he's alive, because it's like a new drawing that she's never seen before, and she was led to believe that her father, because she thinks her father's really, really old, and the story is that he was banished from London for doing these things, experiments on live animals, and she thinks that because he's old, wherever he went to, he's probably dead now, and she heard all these stories that he was a madman, but she never really knew her father. So what happens is, she goes to... There's a lot that happens in between, but the way she gets to the island is she goes to this... She has to seek accommodation, in this place, in like a bar, or I don't know what it's called, like an inn or a tavern, because one of the people whose houses she cleans, he rapes her, well, he tries to rape her, and she has a scalpel in her hand, and she cuts through his palm, and he screams, and she runs away. So she either faces staying in London and going to prison, or escaping. So she goes to this tavern/inn to decide what to do. While she's there, she meets a man called Montgomery, and a man who might not be a man, called Balthazar, which I'll explain later. And basically, Montgomery explains that her father is still alive, and explains the situation, that he was banished. She knows he was banished, and yeah, basically explains that her father's still alive. He lives on the tropical island, and she doesn't know whether he's still carrying out his experiments or not, so she begs Montgomery to take her, because he's leaving to go back to the island in a couple of days. So she literally begs Montgomery to take her with him, and obviously in the end he agrees. And then they leave for the island, and it takes a long time. They're like on a ship for 3 or 4 months. And she gets to know this character, Montgomery, and another guy called Balthazar, who is a bit weird. And she thinks that her father may still be experimenting, because on the ship across to the island there are loads and loads and loads of animals for her father, live animals, so she thinks he's still experimenting. And then during this boat trip, they meet a washed up castaway, and he is pulled onto the ship. His name's Edward Prince, and he's holding a photograph, but nobody knows why, and why the photograph may be so important. And then she's torn between Edward, Montgomery, who is a guy she grew up with. Like, she actually grew up with him, so she knew him already. So she's torn between her feelings with Montgomery and her feelings with Edward, who's the castaway, because she finds him a bit attractive and mysterious. And then they get to the island, and they meet her father, and they stay with him in a place called The Compound. And there is a laboratory there, and she goes there and she sees that he is indeed still performing these experiments, and she learns that he is taking parts of animals and humans and putting them together to create these creatures, and Balthazar is one of these creatures. And there's also another main one called Cymbeline, and there's one called Puck, and there's one called Ophelia, and another one called Caesar, and basically they're all named after Shakespeare characters. And she's like, hang on, my name's Juliet, maybe I'm named after a Shakespeare character, from Romeo and Juliet. So, and she has to, all throughout her life, she has to take these injections every day, but she doesn't know why, but she still carries on doing it. And she discovers that the creatures that her father creates and keeps in this village, which is through the jungle on this island, also have these injections regularly, and she finds out that they have the injections so that they don't regress and go back into animal form, like killer form, because they're humanized in a way, and they have some capabilities, and they know right from wrong and stuff like that. But if they don't have this injection, they regress and go back to animal form and get really aggressive. And Juliet thinks that because of this, she is one of them. But it turns out in the end that she's not one of them. What happened was that when she was born with a spine deformity or whatever, and her mother begged her father to fix her because the doctors only gave them a couple of days for her to live. So her mother was like, please do something. So her father got parts of the spine from a deer and fixed her spine with that. So she has to but there were complications because this experiment had never been done before. So she has to have these injections, not so she won't regress to animal form, because she's not animal. She has to have these injections so that her organs don't fail and she doesn't die. That is the basic storyline. And through this she discovers that her father is indeed a weirdo, a crazy fool, and they decide to leave the island, her, Edward and Montgomery, and my partner, my boyfriend, who lives in Caversham, he's already read this, so he gave me the ending away. He was teasing me, and then eventually he just gave me the ending. I was really annoyed because I didn't have much left to read. I had there's my bookmark. I had about 8 chapters left to read, so I was really annoyed. But, yeah. So basically they get away, she gets back to London, and then she's arrested, and all this crazy stuff happens. So I think there might be a sequel. So thank you for watching this video. In the book I'm reading next is a book I'm really excited for, and it's called Dreams and Shadows, and it's beautiful. And it's by a guy called C. Robert Cargill. This guy, and he wrote the screenplay for Sinister, the horror movie. And apparently this is like reading a horror movie. So this is what I'm going to be reading next, and I'll be reviewing it when I've finished it. I hope I haven't bored you in this video. Really sorry if I have. But I lost my nose, and I was really annoyed. Anyway, thank you, and if you read it, if you think you would like to read it, if you have any questions, please comment below, and I will make sure that I answer your questions. Okay, thank you, and thank you for subscribing, obviously.